My name is Fizza, and I am 31 years old. Even today, I can remember that evening as if it happened yesterday. The smell of pot roast filled the house, but beneath it was something else, something far heavier. A tension I couldn't explain at the time. The moment my brother Callum walked through the front door with his pregnant wife, Serena, everything changed. At first, it seemed like an ordinary family visit, but within minutes, I realized I was about to lose something I never expected. I had been living in my childhood home for 8 months. After a major round of layoffs hit the architecture firm where I worked, nearly half of our department was let go, including me. I wasn't sitting around doing nothing. I wasn't taking advantage of anyone. I contributed whatever money I could toward the utilities, cooked meals, helped keep the house clean, and spent every single week attending interviews and searching for work. But none of that seemed to matter. The second Serena decided she wanted my room, everything changed. She slowly walked down the hallway and stopped at my bedroom door. It was the largest guest room in the house. She looked around carefully, then turned toward my father with a smile that felt forced, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "This would be perfect for the nursery," she said. The shocking part. She said it as though I wasn't standing just 3 feet away. For a moment, the entire house went silent. I looked at my father, expecting him to laugh it off or remind her that I was living there. Instead, I saw something on his face that I had never seen before. Not guilt, not concern, not even hesitation, just convenience. As if a decision had already been made. After clearing his throat, he looked directly at me and said, "Fizza, you're going to need to vacate the room." My heart dropped. For a second, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" I asked. "Dad, all my belongings are in there. Where exactly am I supposed to go?" Without much thought, he casually pointed toward the tiny storage room at the end of the hallway. The room had no window, barely any space, and a broken radiator that had never been fixed. "It'll be fine for now," he replied. "Fine?" I stood there frozen, trying to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Serena had already walked into my room as though it belonged to her. She began talking excitedly about paint colors, decorations, and where the crib should go. She was planning the future of that room while I was still standing there, struggling to process the fact that I was being pushed out of it. And in that moment, a painful realization hit me. No one had asked what I thought. No one had even considered how this would affect me. The decision had already been made, and I had just found out about it. In that moment, it felt as though the last piece of security beneath my feet had quietly disappeared. I looked at my father one more time. Part of me still hoped he would stop this, that he would finally remember I was his daughter too, that he would say something, anything to make this right, but he didn't. Instead, he simply nodded along with Serena, as if everything had already been settled, as if my opinion didn't matter, as if I wasn't even there anymore. Then Serena looked directly at me. That same cold smile appeared on her face, and what she said next changed everything. "Honestly, it would be better if you moved out completely." It wasn't advice. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a decision she believed had already been made. There was something underneath her words, a confidence that told me she thought she had already won. I waited for my father to object. He didn't. He didn't defend me. He didn't even react. For exactly 2 seconds, he stared at the floor. Then he looked back at Serena and calmly said, "She understands. Don't you, Fizza?" And suddenly, everything became clear. Not what he meant. Something much bigger. I realized I had spent years trying to earn approval from someone who was never truly willing to give it. All my life, I had adjusted myself to fit his expectations. I became the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never complained, the one who handled problems instead of creating them. And the moment I needed support in return, I became an inconvenience, a burden. That realization hurt more than being asked to leave. Without saying another word, I walked into my room. I pulled out 2 suitcases, slowly, carefully, methodically. No tears, no arguments, no pleading. Years ago, I learned that crying in front of people who don't care about your pain only gives them the satisfaction of watching you break. So I packed in silence. My laptop, my design portfolio, my grandmother's jewelry box, every important document I owned, everything that mattered. When I finally rolled my suitcases into the hallway, my father was standing there waiting. As I passed him, he shook his head and said, "You're being dramatic." I didn't respond, not a single word. Then I looked toward the kitchen. My brother Callum was standing beside Serena in the doorway, watching, listening, knowing exactly what was happening. And he said absolutely nothing. Not one word. That silence spoke louder than anything else that night. A few moments later, I stepped outside, closed the front door behind me, and walked to my car. I sat there in the driveway for 4 minutes, just breathing, trying to process the fact that the place I had always called home no longer felt like home at all. Then I started the engine and drove away. At that point, I had $3,000 in savings and one person I knew I could trust, an old college friend named Priya. She had a spare room and offered to rent it to me for a short time. That same night, I moved in. The room was small. The bed felt unfamiliar. Everything around me felt different. Yet somehow, it felt safer than the house I had just left. I couldn't sleep. For hours, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The clock kept moving. Midnight. Almost 4 in the morning. And still I was awake, replaying every second of that evening. But surprisingly, I wasn't crying. I wasn't even sad. What I felt was something else. Something stronger anger. A clear, focused anger that felt less like pain and more like fuel. Something inside me had broken that night. But it wasn't the part that made me strong. It wasn't the part that kept me moving forward. No, it was the part of me that had spent years waiting for my father to finally choose me, to finally see my worth, to finally be proud of me. That part died during the drive to Priya's apartment, and for the first time in my life, I didn't mourn its loss. Then 2 days later, something happened that I never saw coming. I had already updated my resume, submitted 4 job applications, and was in the middle of a virtual interview when my phone suddenly started vibrating. Serena, I ignored the call. A few minutes later, she called again. I ignored it, then again and again. By the 4th call, I knew something was wrong, very wrong. So I answered the moment I heard her voice. I knew this wasn't the same confident woman who had ordered me out of the house. She sounded nervous, shaken, almost frightened. "Fizza," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you." I stayed silent, then she said something that instantly caught my attention. "It's not true." Another pause. "What he told us about you, it's not true." My grip tightened around the phone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Serena started talking faster, almost desperately. Word after word rushed out of her mouth. And as I listened, one thing became clear. During the 2 days since I left that house, something had been discovered, something hidden, something serious enough to turn everything upside down. The woman who had proudly told me to leave was now practically begging me for answers. Then she said the sentence that made my heart stop. "Please tell me you didn't send it." I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't sent anything. But deep down, I knew one thing. Whatever had just been uncovered was about to change everything. I still had no idea what Serena believed I had done. But one thing was obvious. Whatever she had discovered had completely destroyed the story she thought was true. I let the silence linger between us. Over the last 48 hours, I had learned something important. Sometimes silence makes people reveal far more than questions ever could. On the other end of the call, Serena's breathing was uneven. In the background, I could hear Callum speaking quietly, trying to calm her down. Finally, I broke the silence. "Serena, I honestly don't know what you're talking about. I haven't sent anything to anyone." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she asked a question that instantly caught my attention. "Then how did they find out?" My stomach tightened. "Start from the beginning," I told her. And what she revealed over the next 20 minutes changed everything. Not part of it, everything. Apparently, one of my father's neighbors, a retired woman named Gloria, had witnessed the entire situation that night. Gloria had known our family for more than 15 years. From her front porch, she watched me carry my suitcases to my car. She watched my father stand in the doorway. She watched him do absolutely nothing to stop me. And Gloria didn't like what she saw. She had always respected me and had very little tolerance for what she called cruel family behavior. So she told her daughter at first. That seemed insignificant. But then came the twist nobody expected. Her daughter worked with a property attorney. Not just any attorney, someone who had handled legal matters for my father in the past. When the attorney heard the story, he became curious, then concerned. Then he started asking questions. And those questions led somewhere my father never imagined. Somewhere that would completely change the balance of power. The house, the very house I had been forced to leave, the house my father had lived in for 23 years, wasn't entirely his. The moment Serena told me that, I felt my heart stop. According to the records, my grandmother had quietly amended her estate documents 7 years earlier, without announcing it, without discussing it, without telling anyone except her attorney. She had added my name to the deed as a co-owner. I sat frozen, certain I had misunderstood. But Serena kept talking. The amendment included a condition. My father's right to continue living there depended on maintaining the property and allowing me continued residency. The moment I was removed from the home and could prove I had been displaced, a legal review would automatically be triggered. My grandmother had planned for this years before it happened, years before I even realized I might need protection. Suddenly, pieces of my life started fitting together. My grandmother had loved my father. Of that I had no doubt. But apparently she had also seen something in him that I had spent years refusing to acknowledge. She trusted him enough to love him, but not enough to leave me completely unprotected. As Serena continued explaining, I sat quietly in Priya's living room. A wave of emotion washed over me. Not anger, not shock, gratitude, deep gratitude. My grandmother had been gone for 4 years. Yet somehow she was still protecting me. She had never mentioned any of this. She hadn't needed recognition. She had simply taken action, quietly, carefully, the same way she handled everything throughout her life. She had planted a seed years earlier and trusted that when the time came, it would grow. My hand drifted toward my grandmother's jewelry box sitting nearby. I rested my fingers on it and took a slow breath. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something solid beneath me. Meanwhile, Serena kept talking. She said she had no idea. Callum had no idea. Nobody knew. I believed her. I believed Callum probably hadn't known either. As for my father, I wasn't completely sure. Within a week, I was sitting across from my grandmother's attorney, a calm, intelligent woman named Harriet. She reviewed every document with me. Every clause, every signature, every detail. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding, no loophole. The co-ownership was completely real and legally enforceable. And what Harriet explained next stunned me. Because of the arrangement, nobody could sell the property. Nobody could refinance it. Nobody could rent it out. Nobody could make major changes. Not without my signature. My approval was required. And suddenly the irony became impossible to ignore. The same man who had ordered me out of my room. The same man who called me dramatic while I rolled my suitcases to my car. The same man who treated me like a burden. Now needed my signature if he wanted long-term security in the house he had occupied for more than 2 decades. People often imagine moments like that feel victorious. But the truth is different. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel revenge. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was peace. A strange sense of balance, like something that had been crooked my entire life had finally been straightened. A few days later, Harriet arranged a meeting. Thursday morning, attorney's office. Just 4 people, Harriet. My father, Callum, and me, Serena, didn't attend. When my father walked into the room, he looked like someone who had rehearsed an entire speech and forgotten every word the second he sat down. Callum barely looked up. Most of the meeting, he stared at the table. Nobody offered a proper apology. Not really. At least not with words. But sometimes actions reveal more than speeches ever can. My father's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the pen, and I watched him sign the agreement. The agreement that acknowledged our shared ownership. The agreement that protected his future residence. The agreement that existed because of the daughter he once treated like she didn't belong there. I charged rent, fair rent. Nothing excessive, nothing cruel, nothing designed to punish him, just fair. Because fairness was something I had spent years wishing for myself. The first month's payment became the deposit for a small apartment closer to the city. By then, something else incredible had happened. I had accepted a new position at a design studio, a better opportunity than the one I lost, better environment, better future, better pay, everything. The life I thought had collapsed was quietly rebuilding itself into something stronger. And that's the lesson I want anyone listening to remember. If you've ever been treated like you're too much, too inconvenient, too visible, too difficult, please hear this. Sometimes the people who push you away are secretly afraid of what you'll become if you stay. My grandmother saw my value long before I fully saw it myself. She made sure there would be solid ground beneath me, even when the people standing above it failed me. And sometimes, the place that rejects you isn't your ending. Sometimes it's the exact push that sends you toward the life you were meant to build. What felt like rejection became redirection. What felt like loss became protection. And what felt like the worst night of my life became the beginning of something far better. If this story meant something to you, Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Every day, we share powerful stories about people who were underestimated, overlooked, pushed aside, and counted out. Stories that prove one simple truth. Life has a way of turning the tables when nobody expects it. And trust me, the next story might be the one you needed to hear the most.